And welcome back to the show. The pandemic has drastically impacted every aspect of our daily lives, and the impact not just limited to people. As our habits and our routines continue to deal with the virus, common pests such as bed bugs, ticks, and rodents are finding new ways to insert themselves into our neighborhoods and, even worse yet, our homes. Our next guest is one who helps people prevent issues with pests and provide manageable recommendations for existing problems. Joining us to tell us more details, we're pleased to have the Community IPM Extension Area Educator at the New York State Integrated Pest Management Program at Cornell University, Matt Frye. Trying to say all of that in one sentence. Matt, good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Listen, when we talk about where we are right now, obviously the summer's upon us. It's warmer weather. And we've also are trying to really navigate coming out of COVID-19. The impact of these animals, insects, rodents across the state. Talk to us. Share with us what we're seeing. Definitely an increase.
Yes, absolutely. And one of the really interesting things has been the response of rats during and after the pandemic. And it's kind of really taught us some important lessons about how much influence that we have as people on their populations. So what we saw early on in the pandemic was, as restaurants and other places that serve food, including schools, shut down, rodent populations in those areas were extremely stressed. They didn't have any food available, and so they started feeding on baits that were nearby, and they also started cannibalizing each other to find some source of nourishment. So in areas like around food services and in areas where people are living in residential spaces, rodent populations increased. And so they kind of distributed to new areas. Now what we're seeing, as the restaurants start to open and food becomes available again, the rodent populations are starting to rebound in all of the areas. So we're seeing this increase in population, but it's not just associated with the food sources and the commercial food establishments, it's everywhere.
Right.
So that is one of the major challenges that we're seeing. In terms of the other pests, things like bed bugs, the biggest challenge with them is that now that people are getting out and about again, it's possible for them to transfer bed bugs from their living situation to other locations. And so as people are getting back on subways and commuting and potentially going on vacation, they may be exposed to bed bugs that have been brought there by somebody else.
Yeah. So as I look right now, I'm a New Yorker. I'm so familiar with walking around the city transit system, and you'd walk around and you'd see, and we'll stay on rodents for a moment, the influx of rats. And you always want to say, listen, you know what, these rodents, these rats, you want to see them out of here. What is the biggest thing that maybe we can do in the city to try to minimize the population, if you will?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is the food availability to rodents. And so it's hard as an individual to really have an impact on the rodent population, because it's all about how garbage is placed out on the street, how it's stored, and when it's transported. So if we could store our trash in rodent-proof containers, metal containers that would keep the rodents out, that would be great. Unfortunately, in most cases, the rodents are just able to dig right into the trash bags that we leave our food in and have a feast. So if we could change how we're storing our trash, that would really help. If we're seeing rodents in our living space, that's something that we can manage on our own, because we can build them out. We can find how they're coming into our living space and then use some simple construction techniques, putting up some wire mesh or filling a hole to keep them out. And that's the best thing that we can do, is prevent them in our own space.
Yeah. And so as we're looking right now, obviously a lot of challenges, bed bugs, ticks. These are common things that are going on that we're dealing with in the community. People ask the question, where do they come from?
That is a good question. Bed bugs, we, in our time, we haven't really had to deal with bed bugs. They have been around for hundreds of years. And just in the early 2000s, they started to make a resurgence and come back to human society. And the way that bed bugs operate is they are cryptic little vampires. They'll hide in places near where people are resting, and they'll feed on them while they sleep. How they get moved to new locations is that they will potentially go into someone's backpack or their other items that they bring with them to work or on vacation, and they get dropped off in new locations. So they can easily be spread as a hitchhiker to locations where people are hanging out. And then once they're there, they find the place where someone's resting, they can feed on them and start their own population. So it's really easy for populations of bed bugs to get established in locations once they've been dropped off in that spot.
Yeah. I'm thinking for, the general population, a lot of us are just really concerned with all that goes on in terms of, you talked about rodents, we talked about bed bugs and all of that, but prevention, that's key. And so that's what we want to do right now. We'll get to the area of prevention. So what can New Yorkers do in the area of prevention when it comes to take us through bed bugs? And then again, we'll walk through the rodents and other things.
Sure. So the approach that I take when I'm traveling and anytime I'm in a location where other people are sharing that space is to always be thinking about bed bugs. And yeah, that's my line of work, but that's the thing that has prevented me from bringing bed bugs into my living space. So if I'm in a library, for example, I'm not just going to put my bag on the floor. I'm always going to be vigilant of where I'm putting my belongings. I'm keeping them on a chair next to me or keeping them on my lap. If I'm riding a subway, I'm keeping my items close so that they're not in touch with someone else's personal belongings. If I am traveling for work, the last thing I would ever do is put my personal belongings on a bed because that's where those critters live. And now you're putting a free ride for them right outside their front door. So you want to always think about, where bed bugs are sleeping and where they're resting. And that's going to be near our sleeping areas and where we're resting. And so we want to keep our personal belongings away from that.
Right.
Once there's a concern, you think you're being bitten in your home, the best thing that you can do is not panic. People tend to go to these crazy extremes by throwing out all their personal belongings and trying to start fresh. That isn't necessarily going to solve the problem. We want to be aware of what pest is there. We want to make sure that we identify the pest as a bed bug and then take some simple precautions. Even a vacuum cleaner can help to remove an early infestation of bed bugs. So when the problem just begins, we don't need to go crazy and throw out everything or hose everything down with a pesticide. We can use simple techniques that can eliminate those bugs.
I want to tell you, Matt, you have helped a lot of people out just in that last statement all by itself, because I do know people, as soon as you hear the house has been touched by bed bugs, everything in the house goes. And so what you're telling them is they're wasting money and you're pressing a panic button. Matt, I want to thank you so much for being with us and sharing with us. I mean, obviously, if things go well, your business decreases. But I mean, really, the fact of the matter is, for most of us here in New York, we do want to live in a little bit more peace. But thanks a lot.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Well, listen, now, if you want more information, you really can talk to Matt. You can visit their website, nysipm.cornell.edu. And we encourage you, don't go anywhere. We've got more open coming up right after this.